the Literary Identity Podcast, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of the search for identity in literature.
We're your hosts. That was Wendy. I'm Steven.
And I'm Katie. And today we're on a journey through the pages of some incredible books in African American literature. We will look into how these authors challenge stereotypes and celebrate the diverse experiences within the African American community.
Absolutely. We are specifically looking to highlight instances of the search for identity through self-exploration and self-discovery, shining a light on the richness and complexity of Black identities. Now, it's not required that you read the pieces of literature we discussed today, but it'll definitely be incredibly helpful. So go check them out. And remember that our editions might be different than yours, so page numbers might vary.
And what better way to explore this than by delving into some literary gems? Let's kick things off with Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin.
Now, one of the main themes in Giovanni's Room is shame, one that plagues every aspect of David's life. David's embarrassment of who he is keeps him from being fulfilled and causes him to sabotage each relationship in his life.
Definitely, and we can see the root of this shame first and foremost from his childhood, specifically his father. His father invokes toxic masculinity onto David and makes it vocal from the beginning what kind of man he expects his son to be.
Yeah, one example of that is during a conversation between David's dad and his Aunt Ellen. His aunt is scolding David's dad for being a terrible role model for his son because of his alcoholism and being a womanizer. David's dad snaps back at his Aunt Ellen by saying he wants his son to be a, quote, true man, later clarifying that when he says a man, he doesn't mean a, quote, Sunday school teacher.
That's an excellent example of the beginning signs of David's learned shame. David carries his dad's expectations of how a quote-unquote real man should behave into adulthood. His dad's view of him is in the back of his mind or held over him and influences the way he acts. From David's perspective, a quote-unquote real man sleeps with countless women and is emotionally distant from the people in his life. A real man is tough and masculine and heterosexual.
Yes, and we see David's shame and self-hatred projected onto the other characters in the book, specifically the gay men. And one scene at a bar, David is observing a group of men dressed femininely. These men are discussing the movie stars they have slept with, and David is just sitting there looking at them with disgust. David says, quote, "I always found it difficult to believe that they ever went to bed with anybody, for a man who wanted a woman would certainly have rather had a real one, and a man who wanted a man would certainly not want one of them," end quote.
That direct quote from David's internal monologue really drives home the level of internalized homophobia, shame, and bitterness he feels. Here, David is witnessing a group of flamboyant men be enthusiastic about their lives and confident in themselves, and David just looks down upon them. There is this element in David's shame that resents openly gay men for being unapologetically themselves, something he wishes he could do.
There is 100% that underlying sense of envy here. David judges other proud men being able to live their truth because he is incapable of overcoming the guilt inside of him that would allow him to be free. In that same particular scene, David does not hold back with the homophobia, even continuing to single out one of the men in makeup and jewelry, saying his, quote, "utter grotesqueness made me uneasy," perhaps in the same way that the sight of monkeys eating their own excrement turns some people's stomachs. They might not mind so much if monkeys did not so grotesquely resemble human beings, end quote. Reading this is painful, just watching how David dehumanizes these men for being effeminate.
This really emphasizes the impact his dad's quote-unquote real man comments have had on him. David is witnessing this man in feminine attire and is upset because he's a man and should be behaving accordingly. David is displaying the same homophobia and judgmentality onto others the way his dad did to him. He doesn't seem to realize that the mindset that is keeping him chained and miserable is the one he is projecting onto other people.
And those brutally honest inner monologues of David are what makes him this unlikable character. We are perceiving David through an unfiltered lens. His genuine emotions are not being watered down or filtered. We have a look into David's real unedited feelings and his wanting to cling on to normality.
Yeah, and I think having a character that is raw like this is important. Yeah, David's character is shocking at times with a lot of ugly, cold, cruel emotions, but it is necessary to see the wide range of stories. Flawed characters deserve representation and to have their stories be told.
Exactly. You can recognize the flaws of a character and still acknowledge that those difficult characters also deserve a space in literature or media as well. Having flawed protagonists also defeats the notion that minorities only deserve their stories to be told if they are ethical and charming. I think David is a great example that people are complex and humans are not all good or all bad.
I agree. Multiple points can be true at once. David is fighting an inner battle and struggling with a lot of guilt and self-hatred that causes him to mistreat the people around him. David is judgmental and selfish and toxic, yet I don't feel he is undeserving of a story. The criticism of his character is valid, and having a character who is not the most political or morally correct is important for showcasing the vast experiences of humanity.
Baldwin's exploration of identity and love in this novel is truly captivating. It's fascinating how he takes us to Paris, yet still manages to weave in themes that resonate deeply with the African American experience. Now, the setting mirrors that struggle of self-exploration, mimicking the out-of-place feeling that accompanies a lack of understanding in yourself.
Yeah, definitely, and I love how it sets the tone for the book's exploration of searching for identity. The way Baldwin gives us a main character that is physically in a place that demands exploration to be able to get the most out of his experiences effectively places David in many moments of self-exploration.
A great example of that is the quote, "But people can't unhappily invent their mooring posts, their lovers, and their friends any more than they can invent their parents. Life gives these and also takes them away, and the great difficulty is to say yes to life," end quote. Here, Baldwin poignantly captures the essence of self-discovery, the acceptance of life's uncertainties and the courage to embrace one's authentic self.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from Sula, actually, by Toni Morrison. Morrison dives deep into the complexities of identity, friendship, and the search for meaning in a changing world. Quote, "Lonely, ain't it? Yes. But my lonely is mine. Now your lonely is somebody else's, made by somebody else and handed to you. Ain't that something? A secondhand lonely," end quote. Now, Morrison's words line up really well with Baldwin's by showing us the turmoil of loneliness and the individual journey toward self-possession.
They really do line up well because we follow Sula and Nell while they try and navigate the twists and turns of growing up and figuring out who they really are. It's not just a story about those two friends, but also this exploration of what it means to be yourself, especially when the world around you is trying to tell you who you should be.
Yeah, I agree. Sula, in particular, is this rebel who refuses to fit into the boxes society wants to put her in. She's like, I'm gonna do me no matter what anybody else says.
Yeah, totally. Sula's like this force of nature, shaking things up and challenging the status quo. Her decision to leave Medallion and see the world is all about finding herself and living life on her own terms, even if that means ruffling a few feathers along the way.
Yeah, and then Nell, who's more like the quiet sidekick at first, but she's also wrestling with her own identity. She's torn between wanting to blend in with the crowd and this deeper longing to break free and be her own person.
For sure, Nell's journey is all about finding that balance between fitting in and standing out. And her friendship with Sula is this constant push and pull between embracing who she really is and trying to meet everyone else's expectations.
Oh, right? And what's really interesting is how their friendship kind of evolves over time. It's like this roller coaster of highs and lows with moments of deep connection and moments of betrayal that really make you question what it means to be a friend and stay true to yourself at the same time.
And when Sula comes back to Medallion after being gone for years, it's like this earthquake that shakes everything up. It forces Nell to confront all these buried feelings and secrets, and it's like she's forced to re-examine who she really is and what she wants out of life.
Yeah, what about the revelation between Sula and Nell when they confront each other about the underlying tensions and resentments in their relationship? So good. Quote, "In that silence, all the secrets of our behavior were exposed. All the reasons behind the ways we treated each other were unveiled, and it had nothing to do with Jude," end quote. I mean, through this confrontation, they come to a deeper understanding of themselves and each other, recognizing that the underlying motivations and insecurities have shaped their interactions. This really underscores the idea that self-discovery often involves confronting uncomfortable truths and facing complexities of human behavior.
Totally. And the way Morrison tells the story is just so rich and layered. You can feel the tension in the air, and you're right there with Sula and Nell as they navigate the ups and downs of friendship, love, and loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Morrison's writing is like poetry, drawing you in with its beauty and depth. And through the eyes of Sula and Nell, she invites us to take a closer look at our own lives and the choices we make in the search for our true selves.
Oh, great point. And when we see Sula witness the power of self-definition amid societal expectations and cultural constraints, when she says, quote, all that time, I thought I was missing Jude," end quote, Morrison really captures the essence of self-realization here, the moment of clarity when one recognizes the depth of their own desires and aspirations, independent of external influences. Sula's journey epitomizes the courage to defy convention and forge one's own path.
Yeah, definitely. Sula feels like it's a mirror that reflects back our own struggles and triumphs on their journeys to self-discovery. And as we follow Sula and Nell's footsteps, we can't help but ask ourselves, who are we really and what do we want out of life?
So true. And what makes Sula such a timeless and powerful book is it's a reminder that the search for identity is a journey we all take.
So we've explored the intricate paths of self-discovery in Giovanni's Room and Sula, where characters grapple with their identities amidst societal expectations and personal desires. But now let's shift our focus to Fences by August Wilson, where the search for identity intersects with the complexities of family, race, and personal aspiration. This play hits you right in the gut. The Maxon struggles are so raw and relatable, even in today's world.
Yeah, Wilson's dialogue is just so powerful, isn't it? It's like you can hear the characters speaking right off the page, wrestling with their hopes and fears. I mean, it's like as Troy reflects, you gotta take the crookeds with the straights.
Corey is probably one of the more relatable characters in the play, as he constantly tries to find his own path in life, outside of the fences Troy wants to keep him in. It's interesting how the symbol of fences takes on a unique meaning for each character in the story, and it's fascinating to see how each one perceives it.
And for Troy, these fences represent a boundary to keep everything he does not want his life out. You can see this when he kicks Corey out of his house and says that his stuff will be on the other side of the fence.
For Corey, the fences represent his perspective of feeling trapped behind his father's shadow.
Yeah, I think this is relatable for a lot of people whose parents had a difficult upbringing. The trauma of Troy's upbringing caused him to be this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Troy's life is shaped by his traumas. His father was abusive, and Troy himself spent time in prison, where he encountered severe racial discrimination. These experiences harden him and create a worldview where struggle is constant and trust is scarce. Rather than healing from these traumas, Troy often perpetuates a cycle of pain, particularly with Corey and his wife Rose.
However, it's still Troy's personal responsibility to work through his traumatic experiences and find healing. Unfortunately, he seems to be lacking in proactive efforts towards the end, resulting in his tendency to project his worries onto Corey. Even though he wants people to understand how he feels, the way he was dealing with it didn't help him in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And Corey's experience of trauma stems from his father's aggressive and, at times, destructive approach. Initially, Corey internalizes a lot of anger and resentment towards Troy. But crucially, unlike Troy, Corey chooses a path of healing. His decision to join the Marines represents a break from his father's shadow, allowing him to forge his own identity and heal through establishing a life that is distinctly different from his father's.
Yeah, that's a pivotal moment for Corey. Oh, and what about Rose? She also suffers because of Troy's actions and choices, especially his infidelity.
Rose might be one of the most resilient characters in the play. Her trauma is deeply personal and emotional, yet her strength lies in her ability to find autonomy and self-fulfillment through her decision to raise the child Raynell as her own. In doing so, she not only moves past her trauma, but also creates a new sense of purpose for herself, independent of Troy.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Rose's healing is much more about embracing new roles and forging new connections. On the other hand, Troy's failure to heal and confront his past ultimately leads to his downfall. His death can be seen as symbolic of the unresolved traumas that haunted him throughout his life. He never takes full responsibility for his healing, whereas Corey and Rose take active steps towards reconciliation and moving forward. Their journeys underscore a core message of the play, the necessity of confronting and healing from our past, that rather than being imprisoned by it.
Each of these works adds another rich layer to the canon of African American literature, challenging stereotypes and inviting readers to question their own assumptions.
And as we wrap up today's discussion, let's take a moment to reflect on the themes we've explored. From the complexities of identity and love in Giovanni's Room, to the profound friendship in Sula, to the journey of healing in Fences, these books remind us of the diverse experiences within the African American community.
Yeah, and through it all, we see how African American literature continues to challenge stereotypes and showcase the richness and complexity of Black identities. It's not just about telling stories, it's about opening up new ways of seeing the world and ourselves.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of another enlightening episode of Literary Identity. We hope you enjoyed our journey through these incredible books and that you'll continue to explore diverse voices within African American literature.